So recently, teachers have been coming to me saying that they're frustrated because their multilingual students are not making the progress they want. They're making the ask less cognitively rigorous, but that's the wrong answer. If your students are progressing in their language proficiency, it's not appropriate to reduce the cognitive ask because then your students will never get there. What's really happening is your students might be cognitively overloaded with the language. The language is proving to be a barrier to the content you are covering, particularly if you're a non-English teacher. So let's say you're a science teacher or a social studies teacher, where the main content are those course learning standards and learning objectives. You don't want to be inadvertently looking at student proficiency from the lens of language proficiency rather than subject specific proficiency. If you're reducing the cognitive expectations for your multilingual students because they are struggling with language access, then you are actually setting your students up for failure. So, what you want to do instead of reducing the cognitive thinking is add scaffolds so students can access that thinking, where the language is not preventing them from reaching English language, that is. Because your students might be great social studies students or science students in their home language, and we don't want the English language being a barrier to that. So, what are some of those scaffolds that you could do? And again, this works whether you're a seventh grade teacher with the example I'm about to give or a university teacher. It just depends on what grade level, subject level, higher education level coursework you're doing with your students. But the process of scaffolding is similar. So here you see my teaching AI coach bot. One way to get multilingual students to stay engaged and not give up because of the language complexity is to preview the vocabulary. I'm not saying giving them vocabulary lists, but rather you should, as the teacher, identify the various thinking verbs in the learning intention so you could over what those thinking verbs are with students. Again, that's very different from a list of vocabulary words they need to memorize. Here we have an example where I said, identify the 5 thinking verbs students must understand to succeed in this lesson. You would put the goal there and then explain them simply. I added the goal after. You could see it's a 7th grade science goal, interaction between the Earth systems. And what my bot will do is after you prompt it, it will give you a menu of options. One of the things with ChatGPT and bots is every time you train it and add new information, it tweaks some other information that you got to go back and fix. Just hopefully, and if anyone's interested in creating their own bot, that is normal. So here you see the learning goal and then the 5 different thinking verbs that matter most: develop, use, explain, interact. Use a model differentiated from use evidence. What I like about it is it tells you what it means and gives a student friendly version. And you can go over the version with your multilingual students and, quite frankly, any student that might be struggling with the ask in the prompt. Why these verbs matter. Again, this is from the perspective of the teacher. It allows you to develop their cause and effect reasoning. It allows you to help them model their explanations, helps them to understand what evidence-based claims are. So again, it really helps you as the teacher preload some of these concepts to remove some of that heavy English language processing lift. Gives you some ideas on what you could do next. You could put these 5 verbs on the board. And then, so here's an activity of how exactly you could be pre-modeling these terms. And as you can see, this is not a vocabulary list. You could do that as a 5th grade teacher. You could do that as a university professor. It just depends on what your learning intention is. So let's say we've done that. And now I want students to talk about this with a peer. Again, oftentimes students, particularly those with English language issues, will sit there blindly and quietly because they can't really access the language to say what they know. So you want to scaffold the dialogue you expect students to have. And if you scaffold that, it will make it easier for students to enter into that discussion. So I want students to explain this to a peer, tell the story of what's happening and why, generate 4 to 6 sentence stems that support reasoning, not grammar practice, keep them accessible for multilingual students. I think what's happening is because this model shows that blank is causing blank. So again, that would be a claim. These are some sentence stems you could use for evidence, interaction, cause and effect, and comparison and clarifying for a peer. So you might even want to give them time to consolidate their notes, go over their reading, annotate their reading, do that first, and then have the discussion. You see how you could give them sentence stems to actually start the conversation. It gives you some quick teacher moves to use these sentence stems. Another way you could help your multilingual learners is to let them show you their understanding of the subject specific content and concepts in ways other than asking them to write a full essay on that language overload when you're trying to assess their knowledge of science, social studies, or math. So again, I asked it, and this is a third prompt that you could use for your multilingual learners. Give me 3 ways students can show understanding of this concept without writing a full essay. It gives you some examples. You could do an annotated model or diagram of how all the Earth systems interrelate. You could do an oral explanation with evidence card. Students explain the concept out loud to a partner using their diagram or one evidence card. And then the teacher prompts them, explain what's happening and why, and point to one piece of evidence while you talk. If you're teaching something on a higher level, let's say high school or university, maybe you'd want them to say and point to at least one piece of evidence or at least 3 pieces of evidence while you talk. And then it gives you a cause and effect chain where students arrange or complete a 3-4 step cause and effect chain. So you could give them some causes, the event, and the effect, and then they have to organize them in order. Those are just some ways that you can be assisting your multilingual learners. Also, my bot, just to let you know, does give you a coaching lens. It tells you why these strategies are good to do and gives you some next steps as well. My name is John Shambari from Have a Life Teaching. I help teachers teach and school leaders lead. If you are a teacher looking for coaching around the concepts that I'm presenting, I offer a $19 a month direct messaging coaching service that includes use of my bot. If you are a school leader looking to use my bot or create your own for professional development initiatives, or if you are looking for general teaching, leading, and learning coaching, I do hope you reach out.